Welcome to the podcast editing and support show. My name is Dave. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's go. We're going to start the episode right now. Happy to have you here. Let's do this. Welcome to episode 29 of the podcast editing and support show. Dave here. Hope you're doing well. We are into the month of July. Wow. Awesome. Welcome to July, everybody. It's July 1st. This episode goes out, and I'm so glad to be with you. Canada, it's a Canada Day, so it's a day where we celebrate all things Canada. So for everyone around the world, you can now say to me, Happy Canada Day, Dave. You ready? 3, 2, 1. Aw, thanks. That's so kind of you. Thank you for doing that. Yes, it's Canada Day. It's a day where we all go outside and hug a Canadian tree, drink maple syrup, and say sorry to everyone we meet. It's kind of like a big festival of Canada. We put on our Canadian tuxedos, which is a jean jacket, right? And jeans. And that's our Canadian tuxedo. Or we wear plaid. We like a lot of plaid up here. So we're plaid to see you. Thank you. And we do a lot of Canadian things like complain about the rest of the world. We play that nobody knows who we are. We play with the polar bears because apparently everybody thinks we have polar bears in our backyard. We have snow, like snowball fights in the middle of July because, you know, there's snow in July. And we correct everybody on the proper spelling of how to say things like niche instead of niche, which makes me think of this.
Who are you? We are the knights who say...
Every time I hear somebody say niche, I think of that clip. So I want to talk today, getting completely back on track. Thank you for sticking through all that. I want to talk today about hiring the right fit. What to look for in a podcast producer, right? You're looking for somebody to help you with your show. Come on, Dave. What do I need to look for? What are some of the main things? The show notes for this episode will be your best friend. So please go there and you can click on through and read through as I go through this. But you will see some great things to think about when you're talking about hiring the right fit for your podcast. The right podcast producer is both an artist and a technician. As you look to secure the perfect match for your show and a long-term relationship with a podcast producer, you need to zero on some key qualities. And the first one is technical expertise. When you're looking for a podcast producer, look for someone who has a command over the technical aspects of post-production, particularly video and audio editing skills. This is like a non-negotiable. You need to have somebody you can trust. You don't need to be explaining to them how to do their job. They need to step up and do it the right way the first time. You're paying them for this. So you expect something of service level that's an expert would provide. Make sure you do not settle for anything less and don't get frustrated. There's always a better person out there for you if you're currently working with somebody and they're not meeting your expectations. Definitely reach out. I can point you in the direction of some great editors, and I personally do editing as well. Look for somebody with great technical experience and expertise. The next one is you need a podcast producer who has a genuine knack for creativity. There's a lot of creativity that happens behind the scenes of a podcast, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of finesse, a lot of things happen and you're not even aware of it. Next time you go to a big concert, look for the sound booth. Look for the place where the team is running all of the sound for the event. And the one time that everybody notices them is when something goes wrong. The whole room turns around and like glares at them like, how dare you wreck my concert? But for the most part, you never even notice them, right? It's all the stuff happening behind the scenes. And we get to be creative in a way that helps you look good as a podcaster. You want to have somebody with a keen, creative eye and ear for all things storytelling, constructing a great episode, innovating your content and making it unique. You want to have all of these great key pieces that make your podcast producer creative. To have a non-creative podcast producer will be a chore for you. You're going to be dragging them like a reluctant donkey down the path as they're just so obstinate and stubborn. They don't want to do anything. No, leave me alone. I do it my way. You want to have somebody who's creative, thinks outside of the box, brings great ideas to you as a podcaster to help your show get better. Find somebody with a great knack for creativity. Another thing you need to find when you're looking for a great podcast producer is somebody who's strategic. They think strategically first. That's the mindset you want for a great podcast producer. You're going to want a podcast producer that has an understanding of the broader podcast landscape. You don't want somebody who just does an edit of your podcast. That's the ground level. You want somebody who knows the podcast industry. You want somebody who does their research, that knows trends, that knows things that are happening on podcast hosting sites like Buzzsprout and Spotify for Podcasters and Captivate. You want to know about things that are happening in the industry. Are we getting more listeners in the space? As a general overview of all podcasting. How many new podcasts have been released this week? What are the trends? What are we seeing more of? Is video more important than audio? Is audio still supreme compared to video? What's going on with YouTube? What's going on with Spotify? All of these things are things you would love to know. And if you have a good, aka us, a great podcast producer, they're going to be up to speed on all of the great things happening in podcasting so they can guide and help you direct your ship, to help you to guide your podcast. You want somebody who's not following behind, but out there right on the beginning and up the front so they know what's happening in the space. Look for somebody who builds strategy into everything that they do. Your producer should have the skills in audience growth, analytics, how to monetize your podcast, and how to be on top of the latest trends and tools in podcasting. Make sure you find somebody who builds strategy into their podcast editing and support for your show. That is worth every penny. The next thing you need is somebody who's great at organization and great at communication. Podcasters tend to be creative. And creative people, broad stroke here, everyone, creative people tend not to be that organized. We have 1,000 things going on at the same time. We're dreaming up new things. We've got things half started, half cooked, half baked. Everything is kind of in a state of flux because we're always like, oh, what about this? Oh, I could do this too. And maybe that. And we're chasing our tails. We're all over the place. We're all over the board. You need somebody to come in and go, Dave, have a seat. Drink your coffee. Let's talk. You are all over the board here. Let's focus on one thing and do it well, and then add the next thing, and then add the next thing. You want somebody who's great at being organized and great at communication, communicating with you, communicating with guests, communicating with the audience. You want somebody that's great in both of those things. You really need a producer who can help you streamline all of the things you do and make your life easier, not harder, right? We don't need that. Whoever you bring on board should be able to manage schedules, guests, resources, workflows, be efficient, and also they need to know how to manage you. Yes, you, the one in the mirror looking at yourself right now. You. They need to know how to manage you, and you need to let them. Let them help you be organized. Let them help you with your communication style and how you do it and give you tips and ideas how to be a better podcaster. We learn from listening and helping other shows, and we can bring that knowledge to your show. So you get the benefit of our knowledge from another podcaster. As we help them, we learn from them, we help them, we bring that right to you, and you get to learn as well. You can't learn that on your own. You need somebody to help you with that. We can help you be organized, and we can help you with great communication. And the other thing you need to think about when you're looking for a podcast producer is they got to have passion for podcasting. This can't be something they do on top of 100 other things that they do. And, podcasting is trendy, so I'm going to be a podcast producer. A, they've never been on a podcast. B, they don't even have their own show. I have 8 different podcasts. They've never been a podcast guest. They don't know anything about the industry. They send out emails to podcasters saying, my person would be a great guest for your show, and they don't even know what the show's about. They charge you money for services they don't even know what they're talking about because they've never invested and been in the industry. You want to hire somebody who has a passion for podcasting. Look for someone with a genuine enthusiasm for podcasting. It's going to be quite evident. They got to have a drive to explore new ideas. And you get bonus points if they love what you talk about. So if you're in the financial space, having somebody who loves financial podcasts is a great bonus. If you are a storyteller and you have a podcaster who loves storytelling, like they could go on and on and on, then that's a good fit, right? If you have a podcast about the medical field and the person has sweet clue what you're talking about, it's going to be hard for them to show passion for what you talk about. And it's going to be a harder road to travel. It's possible, but it's going to be a little more difficult. Find someone who has a passion for podcasting and a passion for what you talk about on your show. Find out what they listen to. Does your podcast producer listen to podcasts? Great question to ask them. If they say, no, I'm too busy to listen to podcasts, that's a great indication that this might not be the podcast producer for you. Ask them if they have their own podcast so you can listen to them to hear what they think good sounds like. And if they say, no, I don't have a podcast because I'm too busy being a podcast producer, again, I ask you, how are they keeping up on the trends and how do they know what's going on in the industry? A, they got to read a lot, or B, they can just be a podcaster. So my choice, if I was in your seat and if I was making a decision, I would want to know they listen to podcasts and they are a podcaster. And if they don't, I would not hire them. I wouldn't. And you're like, oh, Dave, but I am that person. I don't have a podcast and I don't listen to shows, but I am a producer. You'll be a better producer if you do those two things. That's my challenge to you. Even if you do 1 episode a month, 12 episodes a year, be a podcaster. Talk about your business, promote what you do to help podcasters, and get more business. Do it. Let people hear you on the mic so that they can connect with you and they can come and hire you. That's why I'm doing this show. I want people to hear my podcast and go, this Dave guy, he's a little nuts, but I think I like him. I think I might want to work with this guy. That's why I have the podcast editing and support show. Do you see what I'm doing here? There's a big plan, and you're part of it. Thanks for listening. In my past, I have been working in the HR field. Human resources. Again, we got these acronyms to save time. Human resources. I took my degree and I went and took a postgraduate course, and it was a 1-year intensive, including a co-op placement, which I had to do for free. And it was funny. I went for when they announced to the group of students that we had to go out and find a co-op placement, I had one the very same day. I went and did it because I knew all of my classmates, 20, 30 of us, were all looking for the same thing. So I'm like, I'm not waiting on this. So I went down to an employment agency where I live. I got an interview with them, and my anticipation for our conversation was they were going to help me find a place where I could do my co-op. Okay, so my whole entire interview, I'm answering and framing my questions around where I would like to help and who I could serve and my intentions of working with someone. And at the end, they said to me, when can you start? And I'm like, start what? And they laughed and they're like, start work. I'm like, well, where am I going? Thinking this is an employment agency. Where are you sending me? I'm so excited. I got past this round. They're like, we want you to work here for your co-op. And I got all like really warm in the moment. You know when you get flushed? You're like, you mean here? You were interviewing me for a place here? I thought, oh, yeah, I can be here Monday morning. What? So I ended up working at a place that I didn't even anticipate. I didn't even know I was applying to work there. Good times, right? So when I sit down to do interviews, I I was given the opportunity to take what I was learning in school, in college, and then do it in the real world and host interviews and be the person that would interview you for a job placement. I learned quickly the art of a good interview, which I can now translate into my podcast. And I use that as a tool in my toolbox. But interviewing your candidates is really important when you're looking to hire a podcast producer. So I have some thoughts for you on this. And this comes to mind every time I think of interviewing, because I love the movie Office Space. It's just that kind of movie for me. I got to listen to it and watch it over and over and over. But this is a question that I think would basically summarize what you need to ask your podcast producer. And it's from the movie Office Space. Here it is.
What would you say you do here?
So doing interviews with people, there was one day I was at a library doing a job placement open house interview thing. I was the only HR person in the room, and they gave me a student to help me organize the resumes, set people up at different tables, and I went from table to table to table over about a 6 or 7 hour period. No lunch break. I had people lined up waiting to get to a table to come sit with me, and I had 10, 20 minutes per person to go around the room several times and having a chance to meet with these people. And interviewing candidates becomes a skill over time. And I get it. If you haven't done a lot of interviews and you're looking to hire a podcast producer, it might be a little intimidating to do an interview with this potential person who's going to work with you. So here's some guidelines for interviewing your candidates based on my HR background and based on podcasting to help you. Okay. Again, all this information in the show notes. So making notes while you listen, you don't have to do that. All the stuff that I'm referring to, you can find in your show notes in this episode. Just because someone looks good on paper doesn't mean that they're the right person for the job, and that's why we need to interview them. Asking the right questions will help you gauge a candidate's skill and alignment with your podcast, and you'll get to find out a little bit about their work ethic. It also is going to reveal whether or not their communication style and personality will fit well with you as a podcaster, with the culture of your show, with your community. Here's a few talking points to help get you started. Experience and background, number 1. Can you share your experience with podcast production, including any specific genres, formats, and types of podcasts you've worked with? There's a good question to start out with. Tell me about what you've done. Tell me about the genres of podcasts. That's really important. Formats and types of podcasts. Another question to ask is, describe a podcast project you're particularly proud of and your role in the success of that podcast. That's a great question. Focus in on the experience and the background of the person you're talking to. You want to know who you're dealing with, and you want some proof that they know what they're doing. They got the goods to serve you as a podcaster. That's experience and background. The next thing is technical skills. As a podcaster, you can ask these types of questions of a potential podcast producer. What video and audio editing software are you most proficient in? Do you have any expertise in sound design? Which would be kind of the NPR, where you have the sound of a street or dripping raindrops or birds in the background, a forest, a bicycle bell, cling, cling, that kind of stuff. Do you have any expertise in sound design, mixing, and mastering? You're like, okay, wait a second. These are words about podcast editing and support. Yeah, remember episode 24, 25, 26, 27, and 28, where we talked about these things? Go back there and listen, and you'll know more about mixing and mastering. I don't need to explain it here because we've already done that. Another question is, how do you like to collaborate on the edit? That's interesting. Do they take feedback as a podcast editor, or do they want you to as the host to stay out of the way and let them be creative. Gosh, dang it, let me do my thing. Don't tell me what to do. That's going to come out in conversation. The technical skills are really important. Another question you can ask, how do you ensure that the best audio and video quality, especially when dealing with remote interviews or less than ideal recording conditions? What do you do as a podcast producer when things go wrong? Give me an example. The next thing you can ask your potential podcast producer is about their creative process. Now, I know some of you say process. I say process, whatever. We're good, right? We're still friends? Okay. What is your creative process? How do you approach content planning and podcast episode structuring? Well, you can also ask them, can you give me an example of a creative challenge you faced in a similar role, and how'd you overcome that? That's a typical question for any job interview. What's your biggest or most difficult podcast guest to book? Wow. Okay, that's a good one. And how did you do it? How did you land that guest that was really hard to book? That's going to tell you how committed they are, how devoted they are to chasing that down and committed to the process. Find out about their creative process. It's really important. The next, how do they think strategically? Ask a potential podcast producer, how do you measure the success of a podcast? Oh, wow. Talk about opening a whole Pandora's box of opinions and thoughts, and you're going to learn a lot about that person sitting across from you on Zoom or in person over coffee. You're going to learn a lot about them when they answer this question. How do you measure the success of a podcast? If that doesn't answer your question in the moment, I don't know what other question can. What metrics do you focus on to grow the audience for your podcast? You're asking this of the podcast producer. Podcast producer, how do you measure success for your show? And what metrics do you focus on? Oh, man, I could do a podcast just about that. And you know what I do? I actually do podcasts about that over on the How to Podcast series where we do this. We talk about the podcast. We talk about everything about the how-tos of podcasting. Howtopodcast.ca. If you're interested, there's like 400 plus episodes. Yeah. If you want to learn from some of the great podcasting minds in the space of podcasting, head over to howtopodcast.ca. And we tackle this on so many episodes. Would love to have you join our community over there too. Give you a few more episodes to listen to. Another question you can ask is, how do you positively impact or grow the audience size of a show? What strategies did you employ to grow an audience? Get it like firm examples. We started at this number and we grew it to this number. And we did it by doing A, B, and C. You need to know that because that's how you're going to, they tells you they're thinking about podcasting more than just editing. The next one would be their organizational skills. Ask a potential podcast producer, how do you manage deadlines and make sure that all aspects of podcast production stay on schedule? How do you stay motivated to be a podcast producer? What project management tool do you like to use to streamline collaboration? How do we connect? How do we communicate so that I know you have what you need and you know what that I can give you what you need from me? How do we do that? How does that look? You can also ask them about just juggling multiple tasks, like describe a time when you had to juggle multiple projects and how did you prioritize tasks? For me, to give you an example, I have people that I help for free and they can be demanding. They think that my time is free and it's not. I'm taking time away from paid clients to help free clients because that's kind of who I am. I like helping people. But when they become overbearing, I can't lose a paid client when I'm helping somebody for free. So I have to balance that. How do they do that? How do they define their communication style? And what's their preferred way of collaborating with other people on the team? You, others part of your team. How do they like to be part of the communication? What works? I'm a texting person. I'm a phone call person. I live on Zoom. Okay, well now you know where their safety place is, where they feel safe, and where they do their best work. Good to know that at the beginning. Another thing you can ask about is their passion and their alignment. Ask them about why they're even interested in working on your particular show. And how do they see themselves contributing to the overall vision of your podcast? Ask them what kind of podcasts they enjoy doing. What kind of trends in podcasting are they excited about? If they get a blank look on their face when you ask them about podcasting trends, and they looked at you like, what's that? Maybe this is not the right person for you. I think you're going to be educating them. They're not going to be educating you. You need an expert. You need somebody who knows what they're talking about, who does their research and knows their stuff. Once you have a short list of candidates, you can ask for additional resources to help you make the final decision. We do this in HR all the time. Go and access their portfolio or specific episodes that they produced. They should be able to give you a list of what they've done. This will give you a really good idea of their style, quality, and versatility. Also, you can ask for references from previous clients and contributors. You can reach out to the host of the show that they do the work for and say, hey, curious, how's your podcast editor doing for you? Are you happy? Get some feedback, some references. The other thing you can do is you can try a paid trial project. Just give them a short little segment to edit for you, something that you know has got a significant error or a challenge to the recording, something that you know what you're looking for as a result. Give them a short segment or get them to help you plan out a new episode. Get them to demonstrate their skills hands-on. I have my forklift license. I'm one of those people. Right, yeah. So you go and you take a class, you learn all the things, and then you have to do a practical. And you have somebody standing there judging you whether or not you're good at what you do. We want to see the proof that you know what you learned in a book, in real life, in a safe environment. So I have to demonstrate my abilities and my skills in front of my classmates and in front of an instructor and get a sign-off saying, yep, Dave knows how to do this safely. You want a paid trial project to put in front of them. It could be $20. And you pay them, they do the project, and you give them feedback. You get a good idea of what they're like, turnaround time, all of that stuff. I'd give them something as well that kind of makes them ask you questions. Like, I see that something's missing here. Just want to reach out and go, hey, maybe it's a content edit. Maybe you went off on a tangent on purpose and you listen back to it to see if they cut it out or not. It's interesting to find out. Did they mix the volume nice? Did they have an intro music that faded out instead of just stopped dead in its tracks? Did they get every and ah? Did they leave every and ah in? Whatever you're looking for, you'll hear it in the final product. So I hope these are kind of some ideas that are going to help you as you go and look to hire the right fit. That's the main idea of this episode. Hiring the right fit. I'm a musician, playing music for a long time. And when it comes to fit, it actually happens in a band situation. I have met some of the most amazing musicians in the world, people that would blow you away with their skills and talents. They're just amazing. Like, I'm a big fan. But put them into a small group setting, put them in a van, a 12-hour drive, with all the sounds and smells of a van, as you travel from gig to gig. You will find that some people do good in small groups and some don't. Some are good with people, some are not good with people. Some treat people with respect, some don't. And I know in the bands that I've been a part of, we would pick people who we gel with, who are the right fit, over talent, over ability. We would pick people who fit with our band. We didn't want anybody to detract from our band. We didn't want a distraction. We didn't want somebody to overpower the band or none of that. We wanted somebody who was a good fit. And we would take somebody with less experience, less skill, less talent, less ability, but a better attitude. Because skills and talent does not mean anything in the 11th hour of a van trip between gigs in the middle of the night when you're putting up with somebody who's a complete ignorant person and they're just terrible to deal with. I hear these people in podcasting and I'm like, oh my gosh, how do people listen to this person? How do people support this person? They are a nightmare, but yet they have loving, adoring fans. I don't get it. I have no idea what's wrong with these people. I want to have somebody that I fit with. I want to have somebody where I fit in as a podcast producer, and I want a podcast host who knows that I fit with them. So don't be afraid of the talent and the ability and skill set. Find the right fit for your podcast. That's going to help you down the road. And some of these questions are going to be a great starting point. You need to draft the questions that work for you in your particular situation. But definitely put in the time and in the investment to find the right fit for your show. If you have any questions about that, I'd love to help you. I'll leverage my HR background and all of that to help you in your journey and search for the right person. And if I could be that person for you, I'd love to be that. So reach out to me at podcasteditingandsupportshow.com. And I'd love to talk to you there. Thanks for listening. Happy July 1st, Canada Day. Woohoo! I'm going to go outside and hug a moose or something. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We'll talk soon. Take care. Talk soon. Thanks for listening to the Podcast Editing and Support Show. Visit us at podcasteditingandsupportshow.com, podcasteditingandsupportshow.com. We would love to help you find a great podcast editor, or if you want to hire us, we would love to work with you. Podcasteditingandsupportshow.com. Catch you on the next episode. Take care.